This video is about the lesson analysis for the MAT program. And I will say that one of the most challenging questions that you guys have to answer is the first one. And that would be lesson plan and analysis included. So if you struggle with this question, that's natural and it's normal. And the reason that it's a little bit difficult is because it has to do with what's called the scope of the discipline. This question is asking you to look at your individual lesson and explain how your lesson and its concepts fit within the scope of the discipline. So first of all, what the heck does that mean? Scope means the whole or the range, right? And discipline means your subject. So if this is a science lesson, how does my lesson fit within all of the content we know as science? If my lesson is math, how does the lesson fit within the content of mathematics as a whole? So I think of it like this. If my content is language arts is huge. It's a massive puzzle with lots and lots of pieces, all the possible things that students learn and people think about with language arts. One of those pieces of that puzzle is my lesson. It's maybe one of 1,000. So my job is to say, okay, my little piece of the puzzle, where does it fit into the scope of this discipline? Now, lucky for you, each of the major content areas have some sort of national organization that has set up a set of national standards. In fact, each state, if they're doing their job well, when they're writing the curriculum frameworks for their state's public schools, they will base their state's curriculum frameworks on the national standards. And that way, if we've got 50 states full of all these public schools, if every state follows this process, then everyone's pretty much teaching the same big stuff because we're all looking to the national standards to figure out what we teach in our state. Common Core is supposed to try to make that even more true because instead of each state having their own particular frameworks based on the national standards, the Common Core is shared by everyone. It is the national standards and it is also the state standards. That way I can move from Wyoming to Florida with my 12-year-old, and what they were studying last week in Wyoming in mathematics might be the same that they're studying in the new place we live. Now, not every state does Common Core. So if Florida doesn't do it and you know that, you got me, but I just made that up off the top of my head. So that's what scope of the discipline means. The reason this is tough for someone at your stage is you have not taught your subject for a whole year. You have not been ingrained in thinking about where all the pieces of your content are taught and why. You haven't seen probably a lot of documents from school districts showing here's what we all teach in 7th grade, and here's what was taught in 6th grade, and here's what's taught in 8th grade, and here's what you got to teach so they're ready for 9th grade. And the more you're exposed to that, your first few years of teaching, the better you understand the scope of the discipline. So where do you go to get some help answering this question? You go to the national standards for your discipline. How do you find those? The easiest way is just to Google, national standards for mathematics. Now, Common Core is the national standards. So that's where you ought to be going for math. For science, it's the Next Generation Science Standards. For social studies, it's the National Standards for Social Studies. And I've pulled a few of these up. So I Googled National Standards Social Studies and I found the NCSS National Standards. And just as an illustration, when you get to these websites, it's not just going to slap you in the face with the standards. You're going to have to look around for them. And I'll tell you that for social studies, well, what you can do is you just start looking around and you see, all right, oh, look, curriculum standards. Let's just go to this first page and see what we've got here. Now this page has been reworked, so I don't know exactly what I'm looking for right now. So literally you have to just read around. Social State Standards. This is the College, Career, and Civic Framework for Social Studies State Standards. This is a big document. I can download the whole thing. The social studies used to have these 10 big ideas in social studies. And sometimes those were really, really helpful. Let's see if I can look around real quick and find these. Let's just go back to curriculum standards. Let's see what we get when we click on this. Well, that's just an article. Let's see what we got over here. This is looking more like what I'm after. There we go. The 10 themes of social studies. Here we go. Look, culture. And underneath culture, we've got these bigger ideas. Time, continuity, and change. And we've got some big ideas. People, places, and environment. So if I'm writing a social studies lesson, then one of the things I need to do is I need to think about my lesson and figure out first, where does it fit underneath one of these 10 themes? Let's just say that my lesson, I'm like, yep, fits right there under power, authority, and governance. That's where it fits. Then I look at these different components to make sure that I see where it fits. And I'm going to read through all of these because reading these and looking at the language and the kinds of ideas will help me to better answer the question. So once I feel like I know the big idea that it fits under and I know some of the details, then I'm ready to go back and try to write a description to say, hey, my lesson about whatever it is I'm teaching, it fits within the national standards for social studies because it's about power, authority, and governance, which is one of the 10 themes of social studies. And then I might get more specific. What I'm not going to do is copy paste, like, here's the answer, copy, and paste it in. Because remember, when you answer this question, you're trying to earn points on a rubric. And if you copy paste information from a website and just drop it in here, you're not showing your understanding. So when you answer this question, use your own words. I wouldn't copy paste anything. I would explain what is in the national standards, and I would explain maybe the number 6 of the 10 themes. I would put it into my own words, and I would explain how my lesson fits within that framework. But I would not copy paste because it doesn't show that you know anything. And this is really about showing what you know. So I'm just going to warn you, number 1 is a little challenging. How do you do good on it? You find the national standards for your content area and you hunt around on that website until you see something that kind of puts it all together in maybe a big list. I'll show you on science. If you go to the next generation science standards, and I'll be honest with you, it took me probably an hour to hunt around and find what it is that I'm looking for here. But I'm looking for what's called the cross-cutting concepts. And let's see if I can find them again. Okay, you start with these 3 dimensions. And this is very big ideas, practices, cross-cutting concepts, and core ideas. And then I looked at, maybe it was, the cross-cutting concepts. Next page showed, patterns, cause and effect, scale, proportion, and quantity, systems and system models, energy and matter. These are the big cross-cutting concepts of the science framework. So this might be the place that I start. This might not be the only place that I go. In fact, I can keep reading and I can get a detailed description of each of these cross-cutting concepts. And once I figure out the one that I think matches my lesson, I'd be smart if I read the section carefully, I really think about it, and then I'm ready to try to go and answer this question, which would be my little lesson on whatever it is in science. How does it fit with the scope of the discipline? And I'm going to base my answer in the cross-cutting concepts. And I'm not going to copy paste. I'm going to show what I really know based upon my reading and my study. And I'm going to do my best to answer the question. And that's number 1. Number 2 and number 3, for this class, you skip because we don't have real students to base our answers on. So you will not be trying to answer number 2 or number 3. You'll just leave them blank and you'll catch up to those later on in another class. So that jumps us all the way down to number 4. Number 4, how does your lesson objective connect to prior lessons and future learning expectations? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. There are some pages on the presentation to explain to you how to answer number 1, and there are some links to some of these professional organizations that you might try. And then you're skipping number 2 and 3 for MAT 5310. So for past and future connections, my little lesson on whatever it may be, how does it connect to recent and a recent lesson and the next lesson? For this class, you're going to have to make up some of this stuff because you have not been teaching a unit. You don't know, You can't say, yeah, yesterday we did this and tomorrow we're doing that. But I want you to imagine whatever your lesson is, you think, okay, what would probably have come right before this and what will probably be coming right after it? And you may have to make those things up or imagine what they might be. But again, you're practicing answering these questions correctly. So don't just skip it because you're like, well, I'm not really teaching this. I don't know what past and future are. Practice answering the question by just making it up. I'll be able to tell just by what you've written if you get the idea of how to answer the question. The biggest thing you don't do is say, well, last year in 5th grade they learned this, so this year in 6th grade we're learning this. You're supposed to connect it to recent previous lesson, or for the future, a lesson that's coming directly in the future, like the next day or the next week. And that's how you answer that one correctly. All right, so now we're on number 5. What do you want students to know and be able to do as a result of the lesson? This one's really just a restatement of your objectives. But this time, instead of just writing out the objective and copy-pasting it, why don't you write about it in your own words just a bit? Why do you think it's significant that students be able to identify and explain the 10 road signs? So it would be a short paragraph instead of just a copy-paste from the lesson plan. Number 6, what resources? We already kind of answered this question. On the lesson plan, we filled in the materials box, which is pretty much the same thing we're doing here. So this one, you really actually could copy the answer from the lesson plan and stick it in here. Now, why would we ask you to do that again? It's because you're setting yourself up to answer number 7. Number 6 is, what am I using? Resources, materials. And then number 7 is, all right, how am I using these to help me achieve the learning goals of the lesson? Which is super crucial that you stop and you say, okay, well, why am I using a visual presentation? Why am I using colored markers and paper? Why am I using manipulatives and poker chips to teach this math concept? So you'll name some materials that you think are really going to enhance the lesson, and you'll explain why you've included these materials. It could be because you feel like the material will really help. It really meets the objective, like identifying. Let's say my objective is to identify road signs. Well, if I have pictures of road signs, that should really help people to be able to identify road signs, right? Because I've got pictures of them, and the pictures should help them be able to do that pretty easily. That's a good reason to use pictures of road signs when we're trying to identify road signs. So you can hear what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to align my choice of material or resource with my learning goal. Explaining the road signs, I might find 2 or 3 short YouTube videos that demonstrate cars maybe correctly yielding and an incorrect yield. And those, I might say, you know what, I'm going to show those videos because I feel like that yielding is kind of a tricky one, and this will really show them what a yield should look like. The slowing down and the looking and the listening and then proceeding versus just plowing through the intersection. I might write, all right, I'm going to show you these 2 YouTube videos because they demonstrate yield clearly. And I feel like that when students are asked to explain yield, that these visual examples, since I can't put them in a car and let them feel the yield, I can show them these videos should help them better understand the yield concept. So I've listed in number 6. Number 7, I'm going to explain, well, here's why I've included these. So I'm going to stop this video here and I'm going to start a new one, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the idea of alignment of your grouping materials and methods and what this means.